Hey everyone, we should hopefully be live and you should be seeing us all around the world on YouTube. Thank you very much for joining us. This is BrisJS and you're with us again today to hear from the wonderful insights of our volunteer speakers from Brisbane and abroad. Now that we're in live stream mode and when we are going back to in-person events, which is hopefully very soon, to kind of handle the logistics as well. We can hopefully still continue to broadcast live streams as well, but and of course that's more logistics again. But we'll see how we go. We'll make sure we can cater for both camps and make sure that that everyone's handled. Yes, it's on. Hi, Developer Steve, and to everyone on the chat. Yes, I see all your messages come through. Yes, we have 404 subscribers. Do not panic. You have found us. It is not a 404 not found. So we're definitely here. It's going to be a bit concerning if we get up into the 500s, 500 error messages. Gotta love the good old web dev joke. I'm going to start sharing some slides, and we'll put up some information as we always do for any of our newcomers, and we'll introduce BrisJS for this evening and introduce our speakers. So you can reach myself and have a look at BrisJS at these locations, and I will jump through and talk about Slido. Slido is a little tool that we're using just to capture your feedback in any Q&A. It's been particularly useful because it's nice to have that interactivity, and on a live stream is sometimes difficult to jump into the chat or going back and forth. You can also upvote your favorite question and make sure that it gets answered quicker. But we generally get through every question, so make sure that you get your interesting feedback in there, make it interactive. Yeah, you just hop on to slido.com. You can get in there really quickly with 222 as the code. I'm also going to share a link on the YouTube chat. You can do that there as well. If it's, for some reason, maybe you're on a mobile device and it's awkward and you can't jump between those two things, feel free to, if you really have to throw in some questions on the YouTube chat as well. And I'll catch it and I'll feed it back into Slido and make sure that we've got all of the questions answered as well. Excuse me. All good. Hopefully that's clear. And I'll share the link in just a minute after I've done my preamble. Another important piece to do is our acknowledgement of country, because, as we're all distributed, we definitely should be acknowledging where we are in the land of which we are currently viewing, and in this case, where we are presenting from. So I'd like to begin by acknowledging the traditional owners of the site which I'm broadcasting from today, which is the Yugara and Bundjalung people. And I'd like to pay my respects to elders past, present, and emerging. And in our next slide is a reminder that meetup.com exists. It's a thing. We still try and centralize a lot of the information here. It provides a convenient way for me to do a mass email out to everyone to show the lineup. But as you'll find in the next couple of slides, there's also a couple of other ways to make sure that you're in touch and that you can see the upcoming speakers and updates. So code of conduct, if you're not aware, we've got an anti-harassment policy. It is available here. Have a look at the conduct link there. It's very important. We expect everyone, including online, to abide by this because it's very straightforward to make sure that it's a harassment-free experience for everyone. Most important thing, at least to me, is the call for presenters. We really want to make sure that everyone gets a chance to utilize this as a platform and get your voice out there. So it's yours, and without your support, it can't happen. So get out there and submit a talk. The second best thing is, of course, that raise some requests. So if you have a particular, I don't know, maybe a knowledge gap or an interest area, you can't therefore present a particular topic. It might be a great idea to pop a little prompt in there as a talk request, and someone else who's got that particular knowledge area will be able to jump in and hopefully submit a talk. Sometimes it's hard for folks to come up with an idea of what they want to present, but they're keen to present. Likewise, I really appreciate everyone who's keen to present. It, like I said, it's lifeblood of meetups like this. So we really need to ramp up and sort of build up a bit of a backlog again to, again, facilitate things like in-person meetups as well, because we need to make sure that there's definitely going to be folks there before we start getting everyone to drive out and gather into a particular place and get, pizza and drinks and stuff like that as well. So those things are important, all the logistics of having these groups. So yeah, absolutely. It's something that I'm really keen for everyone to consider and spread the word about as well. So those submissions end up going into our BrisJS GitHub repo as an issue. So you just raise one of those as a talk submission or a talk request. We will tag it appropriately with labels, and it will hopefully then get sorted. And we use the milestones to be able to organize them into different months. Likewise, if you want to see what's been organized and what's brewing, and you want to see that what's coming up before the announcements have been made on social media or through email or anything like that, you can always kind of check in here as well and see how we've organized everything. Likewise, yep, we've got a few social presences. Obviously, you're in YouTube. This is where we're broadcasting from. We've got Twitter, which is the most active one, but occasionally I'll feed that back to Facebook as well for the folks that we've got on there as well. BrisJS.org is a little gathering place. We've got a few links together, and I'll go over some of the key ones in a minute. It will hopefully link you through the different places that I've mentioned before, a little bit of information about presenting and when we get back to sort of in-person meetups, we'll also talk about how you can find us and logistics and building things as well. So one of those very useful links on there is the job board. This is driven out of our GitHub posts. If we mark it as something for jobs, then it will actually appear directly on here. So this is a job board for our community. If you've got, you essentially want more colleagues to work with. So what you can do is you say, hey, I work in a pretty cool place. Grab what, fill out your own description of the role, or grab one from your HR department or such, and post it on here and make sure that you can sort of spread the word. It's also pretty cool if your employers sort of give a referral bonus or something like that, get the word out through your community. Obviously, folks here who, trust you as somebody doing this job and saying this is a good place to work and I enjoy working on this stuff. That's always a great referral. So it's a good place to find kind of a cool future career step. We've got a couple of community sponsors. Well, in this case, the Zoom Pro subscription that we're using to broadcast with today over to YouTube is sponsored by where I work at PCCW Global and Console Connect, and we're also looking for devs. We've got a laundry list of folks that we'd like to recruit, and it actually in agile roles as well. So if you're a Scrum Master or if you're a product owner or something like that, we're also keen to talk to you. But we definitely want JavaScript devs, and you could come work with me directly, my team, or another team that I'm building. So we're trying to expand quite a lot in a lot of different areas. So it'd be really exciting to come and check out some of this greenfield stuff that we're building. And I wanted to give a quick shout out to Ashley Davis, who's an author, multiple time author and frequent presenter, so friend of BrisJS. He's got a new book out, so Bootstrapping Microservices, and it's in the, I think it's early access. I think you can get it from the publisher. There's a link that I've been sent there as well. So that's something that I think it's nice to kind of sponsor our folks. Yeah, I can see you on the chat. There's Code Capers. That's actually, yeah, thanks very much. Look, you're saying thank you, but I'm saying the same because you've obviously supported us by giving multiple talks. You're infamous with all your talks, and it's fantastic. So really appreciate the amount of effort you've contributed to the community. And this is just a small thing. If you're interested in those topics around bootstrapping microservices and looking into the way that you can Dockerize and use all those cool tools of Kubernetes and Terraform to be able to manage your cloud infrastructure and get all that cool JS code out in the wild, then this would be a great resource to be able to do that. So do check it out. And we've got a couple of talks on tonight. So yes, unfortunately, we did lose one of our speakers tonight. He'll be back next month instead. But we have two speakers tonight to go through. So we've got web components under a pressure test by Joe, and we've got Monorepos with NX by Aloy. He'll be taking us through these two topics. So the Monorepos one is hot off the back of actually having talked about this using PNPM. And this one is using NX. So we can kind of compare and contrast. I think there's really interesting benefits to those different tools. And I think it's nothing but great if we've got more different items in our tool chain. So I'm going to stop my share, and I'm going to introduce Joe to take it away as our first speaker tonight. Feel free to unmute yourself and jump on video, Joe.
Hey, Kevin.
Hi.
Here we go. Starting video now.
There's
awesome.
Video.
Thanks.
Coming through. Great to have you. Take it away. Thanks very much for having us here tonight. I mean, coming to join us here tonight.
Yeah. Well, thank you. And let's see, I'll share my screen to get started. Start the slideshow. So, hey everyone, my name is Joe. I'm going to be talking about web components tonight. So to give you a brief overview, what I'm going to talk about tonight is what web components are, why you use web components, so what are the advantages, and then I'm going to talk about a small pressure test and the results of that. But also before the results, just some of the methodology involved, how I designed it. And there's one particular point about objectivity that I'm going to talk about. But yeah, before I get too deeply into it, I have a post-it note here on my notes to share, and that's to start off by saying I'm my job description is dev advocacy, which involves a lot of tech writing, but I'm not a developer myself. So just to preface, I didn't go to the extent of building my own web component for this presentation tonight. I used existing projects. So apologies if you were looking for the how to build a web component talk. I won't cover that in this talk tonight. But to get on with the more basic level and how I arrived at this point is that a big part of my dev advocacy tech writing work at TinyMCE is looking for areas that I can find information that will be helpful to developers, and particularly developers who are making apps and projects that might need a WYSIWYG editor in them. And so coming from a tech writer background and looking into web components, seeing what I could find out that was useful about them and sharing that knowledge, did what most tech writers do, and that was check out the docs, see what the quality of information was like and see what I could understand from that. And then from there, pull up a demo, start experimenting with the code. And I realized that reading through the documentation, I could figure out see the what of what web components are, but it was that why question that that I really wanted to really dig into. So we know that web components are reusable custom elements. So it's an element of HTML, usually set up in a separate JavaScript file that can be referenced anywhere in a project that uses HTML and reused again and again and again. So saving some time and energy. And as I started digging deeper and deeper and finding out more information, there was an hour-long dive that one of our dev team at Tiny recorded about web components. And I found that useful for picking up keywords that may be interesting, vital to start looking for. The first one that stood out was called the Shadow DOM. that I thought was useful because at this stage in the journey, I was still learning about web components, wasn't really familiar what was going on, but Shadow DOM, I was like, this word has come up again and again and again. It must be very important. So Shadow DOM was the start of really digging into what actually makes up a web component and how to develop with them and why they're useful. And digging into that, I found that the web component itself is made up of 3 aspects, and each aspect of a web component has its own separate spec. And the first of these is the Shadow DOM. And the Shadow DOM is like a separator. So it keeps markup of components separate from the DOM of the host page. So if you have, thinking of the aspects of what makes up a document in the model, the Shadow DOM has partial aspects of the host DOM that it's sitting on. It has partial aspects of that. Specifically, it has a subcomponent called the shadow root, and that shadow root doesn't have a head, but it does have a body element that you can work on. And then next is looking for useful information that was coming up. A keyword that jumped out again and again was encapsulation, and that was coming across attached to not just web components in general, but also the second part of a web component. And that second part was the custom elements itself. So what was actually being encapsulated was specific HTML tags that you're able to create yourself that contain whatever custom element you'd like to reuse again and again and again. And this was interesting because it reminded me of XML. It seems that web components are also working from that scenario where you can make your own custom tags that make sense to you, to projects, to a specific business. So there could be a connection between that customization paradigm that's behind XML, but I can't say they're any way related beyond that surface observation. The next part is the templates and slots, and this is the third and final part of what makes up a web component. And they are basically, think of it as the web component custom elements need a place to live. And that's what essentially the templates and slots are. They're actual HTML elements that, according to the Mozilla docs, basically allow you to, they're doing that step where you're appending content from the Shadow DOM into the host DOM of the web page. And the process that the Mozilla docs outlined was to first make up the template using the template tags or the slot tag. Then you reference that template with JavaScript, and you can usually do that with an ID. So this particular example I was looking at mentioned the get element by ID worked, and then you append it to the DOM, and that was the process of running append child to add the content to the host DOM page. So that was my initial research, that there was those 3 components that made up the overall web component structure. And I thought, okay, so I've completed these steps. I'm getting a good overview of what's going on, but I wanted to find out a bit more about how well adopted web components are, how many, like how are people using them? And just as an interesting anecdote to that, I Googled that shadow root part of the Shadow DOM to find out a bit more. And it's interesting because while I work in tech writing, I do a lot of marketing work in my dev advocacy role. And one of the parts of monitoring how marketing content is going is looking at search engine result placement. And Google search has a lot of moving parts in its algorithm, but usually you find that a project that's widely adopted, that's popular, that has a lot of people talking about it, has taken up a lot of the positions on the Google search results, which is interesting. But with that in mind, when I looked up the shadow root, hair care, of all things, came up. And that was a big surprise. I thought, okay, that doesn't have much to do with what I'm looking for, but if just an interesting thing to point out, if you're looking to work on web components and add them to your project, just be aware that there's a question here of how many people are actually using the web components, how popular they are, if the SERP has such mixed results and keywords being blended together like that. So that was an interesting experience, but with that episode in season 1 of Web Components completed, I realized I've been going through, I'd missed something really crucial here. And I hadn't really got to that why part. I had a lot of information about what they are. And I thought, okay, I really need to find out what the why is here. Why is this useful to people? And what's actually good information for developers who are puzzling over this. So I started looking at other projects that actually make use of them to see if I can try and get an insight of the benefit. And the opinions that Emil shared on their blog was a useful start. I particularly like the idea of sharing a component across an entire project had some merit. So I thought that was a good idea to add to lists of reasons to look into web components if that's something that you want. But another important point that came up was also styles. And the point of the styles is that web components have a mostly independent style from the host page. So what's actually happening is when you get your web component into your host page, it's disrupting that cascading inheritance of style down from the head of the host document, which I thought was interesting because that opens up some potentially useful possibilities where you can draw a line around your web component style and have it independent of the host page, mostly. It's interesting to look into because some of the Stack Overflow questions and answers on this are a little bit tricky. So again, if you're looking at implementing web components, just be aware that some of the styles point that may be useful can present some obstacles. Specifically in this problem that stood out, that was fairly recent, within the last year, they found that, and they wanted to completely have an independent web component with no inheritance of style affecting it at all. So they tried to add the host all initial to their web component shadow root, but that particular questioner found that unless they specified that important flag, it wasn't going to happen. So it was mostly independent, but perhaps not without forcing styles to not affect the web component that's entering onto the host page. So moving to the next part of what I wanted to talk about, which was pressure tests. I wanted to, at this stage, now that we've been through what they are, why they're useful, I wanted to look at trying something for myself. I wanted to see how they actually worked in practice. But just backing up a little bit here, it's interesting because when it comes to pressure tests or comparison articles, which is a lot of what you might see in the marketing content coming out, it's really difficult to get an objective measurement of value. In other words, it's easy to be very subjective. You can just promote one product over the other, put a lot of weight onto the one product that you're motivated to present in a positive light, and not weight the other products as fairly in a comparison. And getting that objectivity was a little bit difficult, but I realized I did have an advantage when it comes to web components, and that was I could quantify speed. And the speed of setup particularly because when putting together web components, there's some assembling, some bundling going on with Webpack, and the mostly objective measure I thought that I could test out was that the time it took to build the web component once it was ready in the application that I was testing was a good hint at how effective that would be to maintain long term. So a larger build time, I assumed, and we can talk about this later if my assumption is off base here, but I assumed that a larger build time represents more overall content, overall files and code to maintain, and therefore maybe not the best experience long term if there's a lot to deal with, and that a more lightweight web component that builds very quickly is more ideal. But anyway, I'll just run through some pressure test results. And I started with TinyMCE because working at Tiny, that's the closest product to me. So what I'll talk about briefly about in each section is the speed, but just to give an overview of the overall methodology, the process I used was to get npm, download the required files, and then use the npm build commands to make sure the project worked and built it. And in that bundling process was when I'd be looking for the time to build. And as the build finished up, I looked at how long that repeating myself, how long that bundling process went, but also looking at the number of NPM packages I had to import and manage when I'm setting up the template JavaScript files for the web component, and then what the process of adding the custom HTML element was, and then sort of putting these results next to each other. Which I'll do at the end of the summary, just to see which editors as a web component, the reusable WYSIWYG that you could place along your page, which one had the quick, lightweight performance. So starting with Tiny, the build process was pretty quick. It was 360 milliseconds. And I found that the TinyMCE WYSIWYG has all of the templating in a separate, clearly established JavaScript file. When you download it, it's tinymce-webcomponents.js. The custom element was pretty clear, as you can see on the slide. It's TinyMCE editor, and there's also that customization possibility, which was useful. That if you just wanted to reference the web component with the TinyMCE editor, and then have editors doing slightly different things, you can just add some key and value pairs inside that TinyMCE editor tag, like reference an API key, for instance. And it would modify that one particular instance of the web component. But moving on to CK editor, I found that this one was a much slower build. And even when it was built successfully with only a few warnings, it still wasn't rendering clearly in the browser. And it took 8,538 milliseconds to build in my example. And there was a lot more files to bundle together. The customization also stood out as a small issue here, which was that if you want to get CK editor customized with new plugins, there's a process of sourcing a specific plugin in a separate JavaScript file, registering that component in the web component.js file, rebuilding, testing that it works. It seemed to be overall a much more steps in the process. With Froala, which is another WYSIWYG editor, this one was very quick. It was 161 milliseconds, but the issue here was that I had to break out of the procedure because I couldn't get the NPM process to work on its own. So I had to resort to a CDN link in the config, so not hosted internally to get it to work. But it was fairly quick and efficient and less overall files to manage. With Quill, This was an interesting one. There's several third-party Quill web components written for the WYSIWYG, but I just selected the stencil project by Killer Code Monkey in particular to work on. And this one built in 3,494 milliseconds, compared to the others, a longer bundling process. But that stencil file does have, if you follow the link, it does have a demo that you can test out for yourself and see how it goes. And then finally, I did take a look at Slate, but Slate is already a component that works in the React framework. So getting a web component for something that's already designed specifically for a framework, and also the fact that the Slate project, while it does have open APIs you can work with, the other parts of the project are still in beta. So comparing it isn't really a fair inclusion in the test, but it was something that I did look at. So just in summary, before I get into the results too deeply, was that this is when, as I was reaching the end of the journey, that these points started to crystallize for me. And in particular, it's like, seems to be energy saving, that taking away the repetition seems to be the key reason of why to use a web component, that it's saving you energy and maintenance in having to think about reconfiguring a HTML tag in a particular way at different points in a project over and over again. And that separation of style is a good element. And if I wanted to find out more, it's those Shadow DOM custom elements, templates, and slots. The Mozilla documentation was a thorough resource. So when just getting into the pressure test results summary, Proala and Tiny came out as the fastest overall in terms of bundling speed, if that is indeed a measurement that's of value. And TinyMC had the least files to work with overall, which I thought was worth noting. So lastly, just for further reading, Emile Perron's article on web components published back in 2021 last year was a really useful resource, and I included the QR code for that reason. Recommend having a look at their article. It's a good starting point to find out more about web components. And finally, I've been Joe, dev advocate, tech writer at Tiny. That's my contact details. And if you want to find out more about Tiny Technologies, who we are, the WYSIWYG we make, that's our contact information. So thanks for listening, everyone. And any questions, I can try and answer them, or at least point you in the right direction.
Thank you very, very much, Joe. I think you've obviously given it a bit of a deep dive there, and just tried to see whether or not, as an end user, trying to just consume some of these things as off-the-shelf Lego bricks, so to speak. Can we see an ultimate end user benefit to the underlying web standards that are being employed there? Yeah. So I think that's really important to kind of, we're being from development backgrounds and stuff. Folks might just sort of gloss over the idea that whether or not the technology underpinning that actually impacts the user or not. So having a quick look at it from the user perspective is quite interesting. We do have a couple of comments, and I saw somebody wanted to start a poll, so I did so. I checked into the Slido as well. And so what have we got here as well? Oh, there's more stuff coming through. So I'll see if I can read out some questions. So there was a bit of a poll there. I'll click to that first. There's a for the question of who has used web components in production, there is a 60% on the nope category, and there's a 40% on the yep category, and there's nobody who's answered in the it might be hidden by the tooling. Oh no, look, it's somebody else answered nope. So it's shifting as we go. So we might have a recap on this one a bit later on in the evening, as people have had the chance to kind of add a few more answers to this. There's a couple of different points in here. I'm not sure which ones of these are questions, but I'll start reading them out from the top. So I'll also just double check that there's nothing left in the live stream for us. Okay. So I think one of the main comments there initiated the poll was, who's gone and developed it in production out of this, community, folks on the current call, and the comment there was, love the idea of web components, but found the API too cumbersome. So I guess going in and developing it directly from the sort of web standards, vanilla JS kind of APIs is kind of proven, and also is echoed with another post here that it's a bit cumbersome. Did you find that there was any kind of reliance or leaning to kind of make that raw API any more palatable? If you just wanted to kind of package something that was already maybe a React component, or something that was maybe already straight vanilla JS and was normally just being dropped in as a JS, or natively working with the DOM or something like that. Did you come across any kind of tools and packaging in your journey?
I didn't come across any particular like attempts to try and simplify things and make things less cumbersome. Sounds like there'd be like an intermediary between like the raw web APIs, just to abstract some of it away. But that didn't come up, which kind of squares with like I don't want to be like doing like making a conclusion based on not enough evidence, but just based on like surveys of how I'd researched on how popular web components are. They don't come up very high. Like they're definitely way behind like the popular frameworks. So it's interesting that maybe a lot of people who've tried them haven't quite gotten that far, or they've seen like the APIs and thought, no, that's too much. But, so I hadn't seen any attempts to simplify it though, which was interesting. Maybe it's just a little off-putting would be my guess. But,
I've seen a comment in the list here, which we'll get to, around the fact that it seems to kind of be a tooling target as well as an underlying kind of raw API, right? If people, not everyone's writing, DOM element interaction from JS as well. There's like React is writing your DOM as well, and rather than it being sort of the shadow DOM or the like. So it looks to be, a couple of comments to that effect. So I'll just read it out. So at the moment, let me tick that one off. So actually another speaker here, Alo, said that yes, it was interesting and promising, but ultimately too painful. We just grabbed a framework and the fact that it runs in JS is awesome enough, or awesome though. So yeah, I guess it's more of a tooling choice. Whether or not the tooling platform uses it as an underlying target seems to be part of the commentary. There's one from Nick here that got an upvote. Is there any argument that Salesforce is the biggest driver of the web component ecosystem? This might be interesting to have a look at.
That's interesting. Yeah, that is interesting, because I had seen Salesforce did come up in some of my research as being associated with it. I think it was good point, because I can't think of any other large corporate sponsors who are pushing the web component organization. So yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah, I mean, like, there's not a lot of. I don't know offhand if there's a lot of push on a specific web standard. Like if any kind of company rallies behind a web standard too often, I think it did garner a bit of attention back in the day. So it's interesting that web components kind of did raise enough of a kind of a new thing, kind of buzzword for folks, and sort of made it something pertinent for companies to kind of align behind as well. But I think, I have kind of come across as well, like in my experience with Salesforce did develop sort of their own APIs and stuff for UI development. I think they did use web component sort of style approaches just to isolate everything, to make sure it didn't bleed into other parts of your user interfaces and stuff like that as well. So that could be a pervasive argument for why people might use that as an underlying tooling choice.
Yeah.
Let's have a look. Yes, thank you very much for that one, Nick. Another anonymous one is, did you find web components have moved? There it is. I've read it out before. Did you find web components have moved to being a more tooling option rather than something people develop directly from their vanilla APIs? Svelte outputs as a web component. So there you go. So Svelte, the web framework, UI framework as well, is also able to output natively as web components. So no extra code required. Did you run into anything around especially the WYSIWYG editor world, where they're using Svelte natively?
It's interesting that Svelte comes up, because the last time that I wanted to look into Svelte, and I was interesting story. I was discussing it with the marketing team about whether it would be a good topic, and it's like the amount of interest in Svelte, they were like, no, there doesn't seem to be a lot of a lot of people who might find that topic useful. So it's like we might just want you, like, Joe, please concentrate your energies on topics that are getting a lot of calls for help. So yeah, so I haven't had a deep look into Svelte just because of the time and energy constraints. But yeah, I didn't know it outputted as a web component. So, but in the WYSIWYG world, I know that there is attempts to from all different editors, not just Tiny, but CK and I think Proala as well, to integrate with apps built on Svelte, trying to make the process less painful with a sponsored integration, or maybe someone in the community being like, I've got to make a integration. So they are out there for Svelte. Cool.
Yeah. No, there would be some interesting interoperations between those two. There's not an extra comment, but sorry, an extra question, but this is more of a comment again, I think, but piggybacking on the one that they probably saw that was just in here. So there's another one raising the fact that ultimately web component standardized tech would only add a tiny overhead. Okay, so this is speaking to the performance metrics, I think, that you were trying to establish.
Exactly. So I was curious.
Yeah, so this person, unfortunately anonymous, speak up if you feel like it, said that it's just establishing a shadow DOM resource in the browser. So in terms of browser engine, it's probably the only overhead to create that isolated DOM environment. And I think, like you said, the main benefits there are that you kind of get CSS isolation in most of the ways that matter. So, and I think the consensus here appears to be it's a bit like an iframe, right? Back in the day, the old iframe, loved or hated, was the kind of the hangover from the web, that people saw a need for the isolation, to put things in isolation, but at the same time, that's a bit dirty and a bit awful to work with. And so, they wanted to be able to pull something external, or maybe render a unique separated component in. And I think that's where I can see the web component stuff shining as a bit of a replacement there, because it can kind of drop something in, not completely obliterate your site styles or something like that. It's kind of, its own little thing. And your approach of having a look at the editor components, I think, is ideal, because I've seen a lot of these web components published or written natively as a new drop-down element, or a new little widgets, UI elements and things like that seem to be, really pervasive in that kind of world. Because
useful little widgets and components and things.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And I think when I first looked at the tech, the idea was that if, for example, in Chromium, the components you interact with, the native widgets and tools and stuff like that you interact with, are rendered as shadow DOM and other components. So you never used to be able to see or get into the innards of a drop-down list, for example, and the actual component, the native component, not just your options and the HTML behind it, or any kind of input elements, but targeting them with your CSS selectors and stuff, that they're there and they have elements and they have things to target. So it's part of a shadow DOM that kind of is in there, but doesn't get in the way of your main page, which is developer space. And so they've exposed this kind of as a low-level API, which seems really interesting as well. I could definitely see it has a lot of usage in the space you've explored. So yeah, interesting. I think it's worth keeping an eye on for sure. There's obviously going to be a play for better interoperability, from the editor standpoint, in the content editing widgets and stuff like that as well. So there's definitely a lot of stuff there. And folks, if you've got more questions, I think feel free to send them through. We're obviously not finished for the night, so feel free to send them through. And if we've got any more questions, we'll bring our speakers back and we'll have some more Q&A at the end of the night as well. So thank you very much, Joe. I think that was really informative for everyone. I appreciate your time.
Thank you very much.
That's awesome. Thank you. Oh, good. Great. Well, I'll be able to just throw immediately to our next speaker. So Alo here has come to join us, and he's kind of giving us a look at how we can package. There he is. How we can package in the Monorepo without all that overhead as well. So thanks very much.
Okay, shall we jump straight in?
Yeah, please do. Please do.
Yeah, I'll just have to remember how do I share the.
That's sharing, but you're on mute. So just unmute yourself, or I'll hit the button for you. There we go. You're okay. I can't hear you. It doesn't say you're muted, but I can't hear you. Technical problems. I need like a button with on hold music. I need to be as skilled as developer Steve. Get there.
Can you hear me now?
I can hear you now. Absolutely.
I cannot share and keep the mic on, so it's not ideal.
You've gone mute again. There you go. You're unmuted, but we don't hear anything. Interesting that when you're sharing, we don't hear you. And now you're coming back.
Yeah, I am not sure what I'm doing here. Just
no worries. Maybe.
Can you hear me now?
Oh yeah, it's working. It's working.
Awesome. Can you see me as well?
Yes. Don't touch anything.
Okay. I will try not
good to go.
Okay. Well, here we go. Bit of fun. That's live. So we'll just jump straight in. I'm going to talk today about the Monorepos with Next. And as Kevin has said, last month Ashley has talked about workspaces, and that kind of comes in line with the NX. NX is kind of a superset of these workspaces. So I thought it was worth having a little presentation about it, because as you'll find out, I found it pretty awesome, a pretty awesome tool. So yeah, hello everyone. I guess we've been here for a while now, so we can jump over that. But thanks for attending. It's the first time I make a talk, and as you can hear my accent, I'm not a native English speaker, so I really appreciate it. So my name is Alo. Alois actually, but usually I go by the name of Alo because it's just easier to pronounce. I'm a full stack developer, but I tend to work a lot more on the front end. I do a little bit of back end when I have to, but these days I do work a lot more on the front end because the front end is becoming so huge now that it does take quite a lot of time. And yeah, you can go, as we will see through NX, you can really dig into the front end now. It's infrastructure, it's not just scripts anymore, right? Anyway, moving on. So I'm French. I'm based here in Brisbane. I worked mostly in France. I worked a little bit in the US, and now I'm back in Australia. There's my contact details, but we'll just jump them. They'll be at the end as well. So we're just going to skip over them and get into the talk. So there's a bit of a running joke I found in Australia is that if you ask an Australian question, they won't answer to you. They'll tell you what it's not. Like, is it far? Oh, it's not close. Is it cold? Like, it's not warm. So I found that pretty funny. So same thing in the true Australian manner. I'm going to tell you what not to expect from that talk. So there won't be any live coding. So you won't see me stuffing up on the keyboard because I'm pretty slow typer. It's not an in-depth guide or tutorial. That talk was meant to be only 10 to 15 minutes. We can go a little bit over because I think there's no, the next speaker has been canceled. So we might as well just use that time a little bit because there's a lot we're going to cover. And it's not an advanced course either. NX is quite an in-depth tool. And I won't make me an expert in 10 minutes. As much as I wish to do that, it's not going to happen. So what's the goal then? Well, there's 3 parts of that. I want to introduce NX because, spoiler alert, I found that tool absolutely amazing. I want to share my experience with it in a real world situation at work, and we are currently migrating the code base to NX. So you always hear about these technologies a bit in the little, bubbles, but I'm going to try to tell you how it went in a real world situation with production code and clients behind and all that jazz. And yeah, the idea is to start interest. I'm just going to set up the decor, like the stage, if you wish, and then it's up to you to dig a bit deeper. You can ask me questions. You can, as we'll talk about it, I'm just going to give you the base for you to try to explore NX on your own, easier. So first thing first, we gotta start with the beginning, which are the monorepos. So what is a monorepo? You'll hear plenty of definition, more or less purist. Let's take a really simple approach. A monorepo is simply multiple projects in one repository. For example, let's say you have your React app or whatever frontend you're using, and your component library in the same repo. That's a monorepo. You've got a Next.js app with the backend and the frontend. That's a monorepo as well. So that's the definition we're going to follow here. Monorepos, obviously, like any type of architecture, there are advantages and drawbacks. I'm going to skim over that because some of the points are arguable, and you'll find tons of resources out there that are really good about where it's good to use it and where it's not. But the main advantage is because you have all your code, you don't have to have the entire code base, but because you have all that code together, you've got really good visibility. I mean, as front-end guys, like how many times have you tried to hit an API and you get a silly answer from it and you just cannot debug it? Well, if you have access to the code, you can pick into it, have a look. So it's really good for visibility, discoverability, reusability, refactorability. It's a bit of a joke, by the way. I'm taking everything ability, but it's easy to refactor. If you change the API of one of your modules, then you can actually your clients using your module and change and refactor them as well. So it's very good for that. Reusable, it's much easier to have dry code. Don't repeat yourself. If all your code is in the code base, if they're sitting around like multiple repos, it's harder. And consistency as well, because you can have one tool chain, you can make everything using the same configuration files, and it's much easier. But there are a few drawbacks. The main ones, there's more to that. There's more advantages and drawbacks, but the main drawbacks we're going to explore here are the pretty complex pipelines in terms of CI/CD deployments, because now, yeah, that's great. You got all these packaged together, but how do you build them? When you only have your front end, then it's easy. You run yarn build, you got your webpack, you build your app, you got the output, you serve it. How do you do it when you got your whole infrastructure into one code base? how do you can have like some pretty smart scripts, shell scripts, to try to run them sequentially, one after the other. But then you're going to run into performance issue. That means if you change, let's say, the color of your button because it's blue and you want it a little bit bluer, then what do? Do you rebuild the whole project? That's a big drawback, right? And restricting access. How do you stop people from coming? It's kind of the other face of the coin of the visibility, is that how do you stop people from going around your public API and just grabbing the code they want to grab? That's not a good thing, right? You just want to abstract that and have a clear boundary with a clear API for your modules, but you want to stop this other code to come around that, right? So these are the main drawbacks of monorepos. The advantages are great. The advantages, they're great, but these drawbacks are kind of like holding you down. It's not making monorepo a clear winner over polyrepo. So that's where, obviously, that was the introduction. That's where NX comes into play. So before we dive into what is NX and why you would want to use NX, just some quick facts. So NX, it's been built by the ex-Angular core team, or part of the guys that were, some developers that were part of that core team. So it has a bit of an Angular flavor. You will see it in its configuration. 2.25 million downloads. I've just checked it last night, quite late, trying to wrap up that talk because I had a bit of a curveball this weekend. But that's a lot of downloads, right? And it's 11 years old, so it is quite stable and growing tool. So that's why I thought it would be interesting to bring it out there, because for some reason it flew under my radar for so long. I didn't even know about it until I discovered it, and I was like, where was NX all that time? So any tool out there should be here to solve an issue. We're not setting up tools just for the sake of setting up tools. And the problem that NX states is that code collocation is not enough, in the sense that monorepos are great, as we've seen, but if you just put your code together, that's the naive way of doing a monorepo. And these drawbacks, lack of performance, the complex deployment pipelines and CI/CD pipelines, they kind of exacerbate it. Like they're pretty big. If you just put your code together without the right tool, it makes these drawbacks much, much bigger, and it kind of kills any advantage of having a monorepo. So that's the problem that NX is trying to address. And NX, they say, well, if you use NX, all these drawbacks, poof, gone. That's the promise. But are they actually, is NX that good or not? And how does it do it, right? So the first thing, we need to define what is NX. I said they have their own definition. Usually these tools, in the front-end world, they come with super like hyped definition. NX is not that bad, they didn't put like blazing fast or next generation or things like that, but they say, hey, we are a smart, fast, and extensible build system. My definition in layman's terms, because I'm just a front-end guy, so I need to lower the complexity of what I use, right? So my readable definition is NX is just a set of tools to bootstrap, to boost, as in improve, to manage and scale your monorepo, and all that easily. So really 4 aspects. As you'll see, NX is quite hard to define. It's even that definition is still like, what is it? So we're going to see these 4 things: bootstrapping, boosting, improving, managing, and scaling your monorepo. So bootstrapping, when I mean bootstrapping, just so we understand what I'm talking about, because sometimes I have a tendency to use words that do not exist in the English language, but bootstrapping, it's the idea of making something easier and faster to get off the ground, right? NX, for that, it offers a few options. So it has a progressive integration. There's no lock-in. You can dump it anytime. If you don't like it, you dump it. It's not like coupled in your code base. You can use as much or as little of NX as you wish. So that's great. It holds you by the hand. It has a tool called the NX console, which is just a graphical interface that is integrated in VS Code. So you can start with the graphical interface, and then when you become good or you use it a lot more, you can upgrade to the CLI. Both of these tools are really well made. Even the CLI is top notch. Bring it on. There's support for all major frameworks out there. And spoiler alert, I think it also, well, it's not really a spoiler alert because I don't even know for sure, but it also supports other languages. Not as good as TypeScript, because NX is written in TypeScript. Not as good as TypeScript or JavaScript, but it also supports Python, Go, maybe not Rust, but there are plugins to actually support these other languages. So they say you can get up and running in minutes, and I can tell you it's real. It's like literally minutes to get going. So this is a little preview of the NX console. So that's what you can expect. So you got all these tools on the left, sorry, these commands on the left, and on the right, you've got a nice user interface. It's really, really good. I'll get back to that a bit later. Boosting, I don't know why I chose the word boost. It sounds a bit silly now, but I'm talking about improving the performance, right? Caching. So you never have to run twice the same insert command here. So you never have to run twice the unit tests or linting or building. The way it works, if we look on the right on that graph, it's pretty much like React diffing tool, you know, the diffing tree. So you change something and NX is smart enough to know who relies on who, and it will just build or any commands lint. If you wish to lint, you can say, hey, just lint what has been affected. So that's awesome. And the rest is cached, and that will save you hours and hours. It's incredible. Task orchestration, the schematics, a bit like that's where the Angular kicks in, the Angular flavor. You got schematics where you can, which are pretty much JSON files, a bit like a package JSON, and you can define and organize your pipeline dependency. It automatically detects your internal dependency, so that is great. And there's also something which is the task execution distribution, which is a pretty hard word to pronounce for a French person. But two things, there's parallelization. Sorry, I'm butchering your language. But that's the idea of NX is able to run in parallel because he knows where your dependencies are. He knows, well, hang on, while I'm linting or running tests on that project, this one doesn't depend on it. I can start building it, which reduces a lot the overall time of running your commands. And remote distribution, which it also does remote caching, which means that you can run these commands across multiple machines. So that is pretty awesome. We haven't explored that yet, to be honest, but the idea of it is amazing, right? And remote caching is also a great idea. That means, let's say I work with Kevin. Kevin has built one of the package. I'm going to build the same package. Well, NX, if it's set up properly, obviously, you can say, well, hang on, Kevin has already built it, and we haven't changed anything. Just use the one Kevin has built and save yourself some effort. So that's pretty good. The same thing, I haven't explored that yet at work because we are a small team. I'll get back to that. But the idea of it is quite interesting. By the way, just coming back onto that, there's something I didn't mention, but NX does all that because it's kind of a superset of the workspaces, which is where I'm jumping on the back of Ashley's talk. If you haven't seen it, you can watch the review from last month. It was really good, really good. It went into great details. Well, NX is actually piggybacking workspaces. So under the hood, it's also using workspaces. For managing, NX offers a series of tools, again, to manage your Monorepo. And the first one is, I just mentioned that it can detect all the internal links between your package and your libraries. And out of that, with one command, you just run nx graph, it will just spit out an interactive graph with all your dependencies in the HTML page. Sorry. And that is absolutely awesome. Like, I'll get back to it, but for us, if there's one thing NX was worth using for, it's that thing. It gives you, in one command, you got a great visibility over your whole project. And that is priceless. Tools consistency. It's very easy to set up one configuration to rule them all, as in one ESLint, one jest config. All these guys are starting to jump on the monorepo bandwagon, which makes it even easier. So it's good because you don't have to do that webpack setting 10 times or ESLint. You can reuse, and it's great. You can apply restriction on your dependency. You can say, hey, that package cannot depend on that one, or this one, no one can depend on it. So it's good because you can set up boundaries between your projects, and it has a unified, approachable configuration, which again is that Angular flavored configuration. Scaling. Now we're getting onto the third part, which is scaling. Again, third or fourth. Anyway, getting on the next part, scaling generators. NX has like two tools here. Generators, it's a bit like plop.js. It allows you to generate files, modify files in a consistent manner. It actually comes up with something called the NX Dev Kit, which makes it easier to get started with that. So think about it as a plop.js type of code generation. So it's really good because you can create standardization. You can, create a generator that will always spit out your React component the same way. And now across the team, you don't have to use cognitive load or effort trying to recreate the same standardization. Boom, just one button or one CLI command, it's there. Absolutely great. Executors, which we can come back after. It's a bit of an advanced subject, but it's kind of a supercharged NPM script that you can run across your project. And the plugins, it's that dev kit I just mentioned. It's a way to package your executor and generator together and publish them, share them across your project, across your company. Okay, so scaling was the fourth one because there is no more point. Sorry, I'm getting a bit lost here. That takes us to the last chapter, which is into the world, as in how does NX, what is my, how can I phrase that? How did NX perform in a real world situation with real clients, with real production code? So just to give you a bit of context, our software is the classic legacy monolith app, as in everything is into one code base, but everything is tightly coupled. There is no nicely set boundaries. The testing coverage is not the greatest. It's an application that's been around for 15 years, so it has a bit of technical debt that's been accumulating. Obviously, some of the part of the code is really good, but others, needs a bit of TLC. So when I came on board, we already had that monolithic structure. So I didn't take multiple repo to make one. It was already a monolith application. I'm sure everyone has come across or will come across that legacy monolith application, and that is the context of using NX. So my feedback is absolutely great. I'm losing my words, but I had put some notes that for some reason I cannot open them. My feedback has been absolutely great. So what we did, we used NX to start cutting down that big monolith application. It's still into one code base, but now we're setting clear boundaries between each modules, each package. When they say you can get up and running in minutes, they're not lying. Like I was amazed, because you use all these tools, you use Webpack, you use any tools out there, they're great, they look great, and then you start using them and you just hit edge cases after edge cases after edge cases. Well, NX really hold you by the hand and make it super easy because it's progressive, because you can use as little as you need. Well, guess what? You can just install it and straight away you got access to caching, the graph, and you can set up the rest after. You don't have to use the generator, the executor. If you do wish to use them, they got plenty already out of the box. And that you can use, you can bootstrap an app. If you choose to use these plugins, you can start bootstrapping React application really fast. And for example, as I mentioned earlier, we didn't get to a stage where we started doing remote caching or remote task execution, but already it's just been a win. The fact that there is that graphical user interface I mentioned, it sounds a bit like a gimmick because we all like CLI, right? It's faster, it's good, it's nice. There's a bit of beauty in the simplicity of CLI. But guess what? If you have a team of developers and you're bringing a whole new architecture, having that graphical interface has been a godsend because people do not have to learn. They can just open in VS Code. They've got the application. They open it. They can see all their options. It really reduces the cognitive load. And I think, in my experience, to try to bring on new technologies, you want to have the barrier of entry as low as possible. So 5 stars to NX. I keep getting amazed by it. I keep thinking, well, I'm just waiting. I'm waiting for that corner where I'll be like, damn, like that is not, it's not that easy. Surely I'm going to hit a wall somewhere. Well, I haven't so far. And yeah, the team has been on board straight away. It's just easy. Right now, we're in the process of writing our custom generator to start to kind of make it work our way rather than the generic way. And even that, it's not that hard at all. So really, really amazed. And I would highly recommend you guys to check it out, even just out of interest. So epilogue, that means the end, I believe. So thanks for listening. If you got any questions, please feel free to ask these questions. I haven't looked at any of the live stream yet. I hope that my accent wasn't too hard to follow. And I hope you haven't fallen asleep yet. So if you're still here, thank you. And any questions, you also have my contact details underneath. If you want to, even if there's no live coding in that talk, but maybe if there's enough people interested, we can try to have a bit of a fun workshop together and exploring it together. You're most welcome.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. That was awesome.
Was it? Okay.
Yeah,
how did that go with the accent? Could you follow it?
Look, no problem for me.
Okay, that's not too bad then.
Not at all. I'm sure we can. We've got a lot of different support, and I'm sure
a
lot of folks.
There's a lot of questions.
Yeah, there's definitely a few questions. There's some comments in there too. So I think that's good. It shows that that there's a bunch of different interest, and I think it's a huge tool. I just pulled up the website, so nx.dev for anyone that's playing along at home. Dear Lord, that's got a crazy huge feature set. So
yeah, sorry, I completely thank Kevin for mentioning that. It's bad, but the documentation is top notch. Like the only documentation as good as I know, as I found, Laravel, which people hate PHP, but Laravel's documentation is top notch. Well, I think that NX is up there too. Like it's really good, and don't be freaked out by the amount of like terms. You will quickly grasp it. It's really good.
Yeah, no, it looks really interesting. I think you'll have whet the appetite of a whole bunch of different folks listening on the stream today.
Right.
I'll start through the questions or comments, depending what we got here today. So I think the first one, if I'm interpreting this correctly, it says, do you know clearly which of your interdependent packages you're working on if they're nested? So I think if you're in the environment and you're a particular monorepo, how do you know the scope of which of your particular packages you're working through? Is that very visual?
I'm trying, sorry, I'm just trying to understand the question. How do you okay, well, I am too. Yeah, it's visually, yes, because each of them is kind of in a separate folder. If they're nested, yeah, they, you okay. So here's the way the NX the NX team tells you to use. That's their philosophy. They say that 80% of your code should be in libraries. Sorry, I should start. We got packages, which are apps, right? Yep. And we got libraries, which are reusable piece of code. Which libraries on their own, they don't do anything. Apps use libraries to render, basically. Yeah. So that's the way they say it. And they say you quickly realize that 80% of the code should be sitting in libraries and the rest in package. So they've got that definition. It's slightly opinionated. So you can make it your way. But the way we've done it, we've got libraries and package. And under the package, right now, we probably have about, it's pretty funny because they say, oh, it's that easy to start a package or library that you'll quickly have hundreds. And I was like, yeah, whatever. But we probably by now, like we have probably about, 40 libraries and maybe about 10 packages. And it's really quick. You just generate them. So how do you know clearly which one you're working on? Well, they kind of all sitting at the top level. You can start nesting them into folders, but they're like a self-contained app, each of them. So when you open it, you got your source folder, and that's what you call lives. On top of that, there is the graph that will show you exactly who's depending on what. And that is absolutely amazing, absolutely amazing. In a code base like ours, which is not well tested in some parts, just knowing, hey, if I work on that, I'm going to affect these guys, that's already a good way to try to reduce the regression, right?
Yeah, that's fantastic.
I hope I kind of answered that. Sorry,
I think you did. No, I definitely think you did. I like in my interpretation of the question too. I think you definitely covered that and then some. And I think I replied to this one already because it was answered just before I think you mentioned the graph. So the question was, can you use NX in doing audits on your dependencies for your security team? So I guess that's referring to external dependencies, but then internal would be applicable too. And I kind of said, I think it was just answered, NX graph can visually output it perhaps, but I'm not sure if you've got any other comments you'd want to add.
I don't have a first-hand knowledge in that. We haven't used it for that purpose, but surely having a graph would be the first step for doing that, right? So yeah, I think it would help for sure.
Yeah, great, awesome. Yeah, so there's another one here. I see that NX Cloud exists. I haven't looked at that yet. Can you let me know whether you feel projects built on cloud tools like GitHub CI should still invest in it, it being NX, I assume?
Okay, so I'm not gonna lie. I'm not super knowledgeable about the NX Cloud. We tend to do everything in-house because we got sensitive data. So we, when I say we, as a company, we're very reluctant to use cloud-based technologies. But I do know that they offer the option to bring your own. NX Cloud is the way for Narwhal, which is the team behind NX, to basically earn money because they're working full-time on that. So they offer that. It's kind of, it's how would you call that, infrastructure as a system. So whether project built on cloud tools like GitHub CI, I'm pretty sure there might be some integration with the GitHub CI. Maybe check the documentation. I don't want to give you a false answer. I'm not super knowledgeable about NX Cloud, but it's worth, I'm sure there's plenty of I'm just going to send it back your way and say,
Yeah,
maybe do some
that's reasonable.
research. And sorry,
I don't
I
think.
cannot answer that one.
Yeah, I don't think anyone's expecting you to have all the answers. It's one of those things where if you know, that's
No.
great, but otherwise, no, it's
Yeah.
optional.
And it's kind of an open question, but I think NXCloud has a bring it on as well, which is something I'd like for us to look into in the future for sure.
Yeah, no, that sounds really cool. Now, I think especially if you've got an open source project or something and you're using like GitHub CI, like you're sort of using all those cloud tools because it's not sort of built on like your own proprietary infrastructure or something like that. That could be really beneficial.
They do have, if you check out the docs, I'm pretty sure they have some example of how you can integrate it with GitHub CI.
Yeah, cool. If you're a maintainer, that's one less barrier to entry for your open source tool. That's always useful. So there's another one here that says, can you qualify who can edit some internal packages in the monolith and who can't? So that's like access control on a package basis. Considering that the repo access is really our only control so far, is the comment.
It's funny because when I started using NX, I thought you could do that, but it turns out you cannot. Yeah. You can set restriction. So I was probably not really clear in the talk, but you can set restriction between code basically, but not for humans, right? So we do have that thing coming up in my professional environment. Is well, how do we do if we want to bring in developers, right, contractors, and you don't want to share the whole code base? Well, unfortunately, the way we've done it, and we will continue to do for now, is simply setting up an external repo with the code that is that you want to share, and then merging it back into your main repo. Yeah. So not ideal, and I would love to see. I'd love to see something like that. I don't know how that would work. So no, you cannot at this stage. I'm hoping we at some stage we'll be able to.
Yeah, it sounds like an overreach. If you edited the wrong package, it won't compile, that kind of thing. It might not really work that way. But yeah, I guess we'll see. It might be in their future roadmap. I had another.
Great.
I had another simpler question here, which is the GUI tool limited to VS Code, or are other editors supported, like WebStorm?
Okay. I think that officially just VS Code. Unofficially, I think there are some IntelliJ porting of the NX console. But to be honest, if you check out the website, the CLI is very good. But I found that the GUI is certainly an advantage when you want to try to bring people over, especially when you go a full stack team with guys that are more on the back end. When they jump on the front end, having just that tab, being able to just see the options, it's quite handy. So I think it's officially limited to VS Code. Unofficially, I believe IntelliJ might be covered.
Yeah, I thought I'd try and search their docs. VS Code definitely there. WebStorm is here, so that's not IntelliJ, but WebStorm is listed, so that could be the way to go. They do have an official plugin, yeah. And maybe was it IntelliJ IDEA, isn't it? It's called IDEA. So they've got NX console IDEA, so it must be a console integration as well. So for the folks at home, that could be useful.
Yeah, I believe WebStorm and IntelliJ are all the same family, so surely that would work. I don't know. Let us know, Anonymous.
Absolutely, yeah. Let us know. From someone less anonymous, Ashley is piped up with a question. He said, "Can you elaborate on how NX can allow multiple CI/CD pipelines for a single monorepo? The use case is in microservices."
Okay, so there's always, Ashley, you might you might be more knowledgeable about that than me, so you might find. So I keep like reversing the questions, but I do know that one of the way it's that you can run external scripts as part of your pipeline. So that could be eventually, I guess, a way to plumb your own CI/CD pipeline. In that case, at work, that was one of the requirements. Being in production with clients, the rule number one is don't break it, right? Because if you try to introduce something that's meant to help but creates more issue, that's a big issue, right? And historically, we've been using makefiles. Like we've got a very complex and long makefiles pipeline. And I've used these script commands or running command to actually kind of tap into that makefile. So right now I'm kind of like going through that monolith and trying to extract what can be extracted and making them into self-contained package or libraries or app. And I use that advanced feature, which is just running a command, like a command line, to tap into the main pipeline. So I believe actually, same thing, sorry, I can't answer, let me know. But there is still that way to manually hit something. And you can write your own, okay, there might be a second answer. You might want to have a look at custom executor, which is basically an NPM script supercharged. So when I say supercharged, it's a bit of a hype word. There's not much behind it, but it's just a way to standardize your task executor. An executor is something that will execute a task on your files, linting, formatting, running Webpack, running a combination of all of them. So I'm sure you can somehow come up, because I've watched your talk last time and you seem to be quite a skilled developer. So I'm sure you might be able to use custom executor to make it work your way.
Yeah, definitely sounds like an opportunity for experimentation there. I think that he'll be reporting back for sure.
Okay.
Now that sounds like a good little project, folks. Yeah, thanks for the question. Also, Nick's popped up with another question. I might have misunderstood this, but can NX be used to create monorepos small enough to then become all-in-one microservices or micro front ends?
Oh, for sure. For sure, you can certainly, that's a use case. You could even have just one library into your monorepo. I barely scratched the surface of NX. You can use it to publish library. They took over Learner, which is quite a well-known way of handling your open source project. So yeah, for sure, you can use it. I mean, out of the box, it gives you that caching ability. So as soon as you have like, a couple of package or library within one repo, to me, I think it's a really, really good tool. Or for example, another use case would be if you're freelancing. I used to freelance a fair bit. I wish I'd known about NX back then, because I'll give you an example. At work, I've to try to improve the way we work, I've got kind of a micro front end, which is just a page with a storybook library, the test coverage, JSDoc documentation, and the fourth one is, I can't remember. Anyway, there's a fourth one, but basically that's kind of a micro project, right? And all you have to do, go on it, adjust that package called these four libraries, which are the JSDoc and the test coverage and whatnot. And you just run NX publish internal homepage. That's how I call that project. And you just build whatever needs to be built, lint it, test it, publish it onto a little Linux server that's sitting at work, and people can just come and check out the component library. So that's living within a code base, but that's completely different from the software we provide for customers. So yeah, big yes, you can use it for little projects, as little or as big as you want.
Yeah, absolutely. Sounds indispensable. How did we ever do anything before this? I'm wondering.
Yeah, you can tell I'm pretty excited. I was like, that's why I decided to do the talk. I mean, it's not easy to come and do talk in front of strangers, right? Especially not in your native language. But I was so hyped that I was like, God, why no one told me about that before, right? So I just thought, it's my moral obligation to come and talk about it.
I wish everyone thought like you. That's fantastic. I appreciate that a lot. Well, we've got one last question.
Okay.
Well, and more of a
In fact-
statement.
Oh, that's good.
We've got Maurice who's popped up and said, to help answer a previous question, we use NXCloud Free, so I assume it's free plan, and GitHub Actions for distributed remote caching. It provides great insights to the build process. So there you go. So you can combine them.
Maurice, you should have done the talk for me then.
Well, we can always get some collabs happening in the future as well.
Yeah,
So
for sure.
sounds good.
Sure.
Awesome, folks. That's been so awesome. I really appreciate your time, Alo, and we've been very happy to have you tonight. And I think it's been very, very informative to kind of go through. We've got a myriad of different tools out there, and I know this is just adding another one, but hopefully the idea is this takes away people's complexities and stuff like that and makes it a little bit better as well. So yeah, it's great to have everyone here.
Certainly, certainly a concern at work is like, oh, you know, crap, I know the tool on top, but actually it's not intrusive at all, and it abstracts some of the Webpack stuff like that away, and it just streamlines your pipeline. It's kind of a of tools more than a new tool itself. All right, that's
Absolutely.
me. I guess I've talked enough now. So
no, you've done great. No, this is just the part where we can see everyone's faces again now,
yeah.
and we can say thank you and goodbye to everyone, and I'll show everyone our final slide as well. Yeah, thank you, Joe, Alo. I appreciate your time tonight, and I appreciate you being able to come in and answering a few questions as well. I'm sure everyone at home says the same. So thanks again.
All right, great. Well, thank you.
Thanks very much.
All right.
Awesome. All right, we'll see you both soon, and I will just quickly throw up my last slide here just to remind everyone that you can get in touch. If I do this and quickly do this button, the idea here is that yes, you can get in touch with us if you would so desire. Do have a look. We did record and archive, obviously, all the questions that were raised on the Slido as well. There's a couple of the poll results there as well. It didn't really shift from before the poll answers here. If I load it up again. No, sorry, I'm clicking the wrong buttons. This one. So ultimately, who has used web components in production? Only 29% of our audience tonight said yes. 71 said nope. And nobody else was indecisive. It's pretty much what that came down to. So yeah, that's all for tonight, folks. And I'll make sure that if you want to reach out, if you need any help whatsoever, and maybe trying to raise or look at a particular talk request, or whether or not you wanted to discuss an idea for something you'd like to present, I'm always available. Do send me a message. There's at KevDesign on Twitter, and I'm also available at kevinv@brisjs.org. Yeah, thanks very much for your attention, and I really hope that you've gotten something out of tonight, and you'll tune in with us next month. We will have our missing third speaker tonight next month, and make sure that we'll hear about the SST talk there as well. So thanks again, everyone. I will drop that slide and wish my goodbyes to everyone. Thank you very much, and I will see you later. Thank you. Okay.